Okay, so hello, welcome to another episode of BrainCast. My name is Alice, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Professor Dora Duka, an experimental psychologist at the University of Sussex. So hello, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I am very pleased to take part in the podcast and BrainCast.
Yes.
And I am ready for your questions.
Ah, amazing. So first one, just if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in psychopharmacology and maybe kind of how you got interested in this field of study and if there was anything really specific that kind of caught your interest.
Right. Okay. First of all, I have to say that I grew up in a very small village in Greece at a time that it was very difficult or not common for women to go to university.
Yeah.
So I was actually the second woman in my village to enter the medical school at that time. And it was interesting that when I was 14 years of age and I was talking to my female friends, they were telling me that their mother was preparing a lot of things for the dowry,
Yeah.
you know, bed linen or blankets or other things. And they puzzled me because I hadn't heard anything from my mother. So I went to my mother and I said, "Oh, you are not doing anything for my dowry. I heard that the other girls, their mothers prepare things." And my mother said, "No, your dowry is going to be your education." So that's how it all started, I think.
Oh,
I was inspired then to have education as very, very big part of my life.
yes.
So then, as I said, I entered medical school. And when I was in the third year of my studies, where I was being taught pharmacology, I really liked the subject very much. And it appeared that I was also very strong at it. So the professor of pharmacology asked me to go and teach in the lab, being still in my third years of studies. So I took immediately the opportunity and I was very, very glad to do that. And it was when actually my interest in drugs and brain started. I was fascinated of how brains can not only treat us, but also, change our behavior, our feelings.
Yeah.
And that's where all started. That's what sparked my interest in pharmacology and in particular psychopharmacology.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. So your first degree, as you mentioned, was a medical degree at the University of Athens. Then after this, you went on to complete a research doctorate on the effect of chlorpromazine on the behavior of thyroxine-treated rats. So could you tell us a little bit more about this project? It sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yes. It's first of all, this project took place almost about 50 years ago. So things related to research were very different at the time. I became interested to simulate the clinical condition hyperthyroidism, which is a condition which leads to active thyroid in rats. The symptoms of this disease, of this condition, is anxiety, irritability, mood swings, aspects that change somehow the behavior. So I was interested in studying cognition and behavior in rats which have been treated with thyroxine and so simulate the condition. And then I was, of course, interested to try to modify these cognition and behavior changes that I had induced and used the drug which was used for this type of symptomatology about 50 years ago, chlorpromazine. And that was the project that I followed with great effort, especially since the infrastructure, the research infrastructure at that time in Greece was really not established. And every step was so long and so difficult that it took me more time that maybe a project of that degree would have taken.
Yes. Yeah. How long did it take you to complete that?
It took me exactly 3 years, 3 years actually and a half, because I started before I got a scholarship to do that project. And I started being in the pharmacology lab. I had started also doing some pilots and things. So with the pilots, it took me something like 4 years.
Yeah.
But the actual studying, it was 3 years with my scholarship.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you. So throughout your career, you've worked and studied both in Berlin, Munich and Athens. So could you tell us the events that made you go to Munich from Athens and then to Berlin? It's quite a...
Yes, that's an interesting trajectory, actually. Yes. So first of all, I decided, when finding all these difficulties throughout my doctorate, I decided that the best plan would be to go abroad to study. Now, at that time, a lot of interesting things happened in psychopharmacology research. The opiate receptors were just discovered about 3 or 4 years before I was in the process of taking this decision. The excuse me. The endogenous opiates were also in their beginning of the discovery, and this somehow sparked an interest in studying opiates.
Yeah.
And I decided that I should try to find a lab which studies opiates, or at least good behavior or relevant behaviors in animals, to study myself opiates.
Yeah.
Of course, before I did that, I also applied in the Greek state for a scholarship so that I had my own money to make things easier. And I took my rucksack, planning that. I wrote first letters in the different labs that I had identified, took my rucksack, a few train tickets, and I went around the labs in Europe to find out which one would be more appropriate for my dreams, but also that they would have liked me to work with them.
Yeah.
And so I went to Cambridge, I remember, London, Holland, and Germany, Munich.
Yeah.
And in Britain, it was very difficult because also, although I had my own money, they wanted me to pay also for the research.
Yeah.
And that it was a bit more difficult for me. I didn't have that money.
Yeah.
Although the labs in Cambridge, I went to Leslie Iverson, I remember then, and to St. Raphael in London. I couldn't go. I kept contact with both of them, but I didn't go there.
Yeah.
Holland and Munich then was the two places that I could choose between. And Munich was my preference because the director there was also Albert Hertz, a very famous at that time person, having worked of opiates. I don't know whether you have heard of his name, but Hertz was at that time very famous. The lab was great, big lab, a lot of collaborations were going on. So I was fully attracted, and I got also the post because they wanted to have me there to work. So that was my first move from Athens to Munich. I stayed then in Munich for 3 years, having my scholarship from Greece. Then I applied and I got a scholarship from the German state to remain another 3 years. But what had happened was that I got allergy with rats and I had to move. During my stay in Munich, I also came towards, at that time, being a big discussion about whether benzodiazepines were addictive or non-addictive. At that time, it wasn't clear whether they were addictive. And in my idea was that they should be addictive,
Yeah.
reading the literature well, it was very clear. And so I developed the hypothesis that maybe benzodiazepines relate to endogenous opioids in some way.
Yeah.
And that's what I followed during the time I was in Munich. Anyway, when I got the allergy for the with the rats, my great mentor, Albert Hertz, advised me and to move to human psychopharmacology and recommended me to the then director of the anesthesiology institute in Munich, Alfred Dönicke, who was very pleased to have me and at the same time encouraged me to do my specialization in anesthesiology, which I did in parallel with my research in his lab, which was on opiates and pain. But he was very happy for me to continue my research of how opiates and benzodiazepines relate, and then moved to working more with benzodiazepines. Now, from there on, somehow my research path was governed by serendipity. So moving there, and I started a collaboration with my mentor then, Alfred Dönicke, in the Institute of Anesthesiology, with the industry, sharing a company, pharmaceutical company in Berlin. And I was going backwards and forwards from Munich to Berlin, collaborating in different aspects with benzodiazepine that they had in development. And then they offered me a job, which I took without second thinking, because it was very exciting, the environment there. There were so many new things going on. There was also at that time a line of research for Alzheimer's dementia, and working already with benzodiazepines, I had developed an interest in memory. So from opiate benzodiazepine addiction moved to somehow benzodiazepines and memory, and then I developed in sharing a lot of research and got a big group, became head of human psychopharmacology on memory and cognitive enhancers.
Yeah.
And that was my move from then Munich to Berlin. And then I moved to Sussex.
Yes.
That's, I'm sure you will ask me about what happened about Sussex, but
yes. Yeah. So then how did you find moving to Sussex
right.
after all of these? And yeah, tell us about your research path in Sussex.
Yes. Again, the move from industry to academia back is a very important move for me. To say the truth, the last years, after the first 5-6 years in industry, I have been missing the academia, the teaching, the students, the aspects that really bring an additional dimension in your ambition or interest in pure research. And anyway, I was organizing a symposium at the time, and I had invited Jenny Rasted from University of Sussex, Val Karen, who was at that time in King's College, and two American people, and we had a symposium on memory. And there I got to know very well Jenny Rasted. We got in contact. We were challenged by our ideas, and we said that we will collaborate. And we said bye-bye, and that was it.
Yeah.
Not on, maybe a month later or some weeks later, I don't remember now quite well, I went with family to UK from Berlin, and there I was in the Downs, and I heard the larks, and I was really liking very much Vaughan Williams' piece, A Scenting Lark. And when I heard the larks, I said, how interesting, how the larks can imitate so well the music of Vaughan Williams.
Yes.
And I was fascinated. So as I was lying there listening to them, I said, gosh, I would love to live in this country. And that was my great moment with the larks in the South Downs. And it is somehow interesting that I live now in Rottingdean, which appeared to be also the place where Vaughan Williams had been living and had gone here in the prep school when he was young. But anyway, that's just an anecdote that makes me laugh sometimes. Coming back then from this family trip, I sitting in my office, the phone rings, and Jenny Rasted on the phone tells me, Dora, you know, there are some posts. Why don't you apply? There are some posts in Sussex in experimental psychology. Why don't you apply? I said, what? She said, yes, of course I applied. Thank you. Put the phone down and applied. And I was lucky to get the post in experimental psychology. And since then, I have been really very happy being there. It was a very good time throughout. So that's how I came to Sussex. As far as concerned my research path, when I came, because I was interested in memory, I started working on memory. I got a grant straight away, which actually Zoltan Diniz as a collaborator, to study memory, implicit and explicit aspects. And then as I developed this study, then I got attracted to alcohol. And at that time, the binge drinking was a very, very concerning issue in the United Kingdom. The binge drinking, as we all know, is to drink enormous amounts of alcohol in short time and get all the effects, get to drunkenness, and then maybe hangover the next day. So that attracted me to study alcohol. But of course, at that time, my connection was from memory to alcohol. So I started studying alcohol and memory. And I developed the interesting idea then by some data we had from memory, why people may continue to drink after a very bad experience during drunkenness, after a binge drinking. Because we found that aspects of experience that you have before going into the drinking are better remembered than aspects after drinking alcohol. And that could be an explanation, because it was puzzling why young people that experience such unpleasant moments after drinking, next weekend will go to drinking. From there on, I started studying alcohol binge drinking and how the brain gets damaged. I looked at certain behavioral changes, cognitive changes that are associated with binge drinking, and we found really that a lot of the prefrontal cortex function is impaired, like decision making, planning, but a lot of other aspects which are also associated with impulsivity. Remain, of course, a question: what comes first, and which of these aspects may be predisposed to binge drinking? But that's a little bit about my path, which made me from memory when I first came to be interested in the alcohol addiction and the brain damage. We may have time to talk a little bit more about that if you are interested, but for the time being, I think that's
Yes.
what
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
So do you have a particular research position that you found the most interesting out of all of them?
That's an interesting question. I must say that, of course, the most interesting position is my position in Sussex. Covers more of the years of research, covers more of the things that I have completed to some extent and have been happy with that. So I would maybe put that as first, but I feel very bad to omit my memories from Munich, the first job I had there, which was for me the start of my career, really, and in an environment that inspired me very much. I will never forget the role that my then mentor, Albert Hertz, played to direct me correctly to my ideas, my hypotheses, my keenness of research.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So final question is if you have any advice for students that are currently studying psychology or neuroscience who are looking to pursue a career in research.
Right. I have actually some thoughts which derive, of course, from my own experiences. I would say it's important to have a good mentor. That sometimes is luck, but sometimes it's also attention to whom you choose to work with, because you choose as well. You're not only chosen. And I would advise, trust your mentor. Don't hesitate to accept their leadership somehow. Direction, actually. It's not leadership, it's direction, because you work together. And don't hesitate also to collaborate with them later. Some of the students feel, oh, I want to be independent when they move, let's say, from their PhD to their postdoc or something else. And I think don't hesitate to collaborate, because that helps your formation further. My other advice is, don't be afraid to be flexible. Flexibility is important. It's very important to develop hypotheses, have predictions, but don't hesitate to be sometimes also data-driven. And change direction. It's rich as well as a hypothesis and an idea, and helps also for doing grants. If you have the same idea all the time, things change. Also, fashion in research change. So that's another sort of advice that derives also from my own experience. Another aspect maybe that is worth saying to the student is trust yourself. Trust yourself and being assertive. It's good to be assertive, but don't forget to pay attention not only in your strengths, but also in your weaknesses, because you cannot be assertive when it's close to your weakness, but be assertive when it's close to your strengths. And I think planning too much in advance doesn't help. But when a change comes in your career and you need a second step, try to plan as well as possible. I think these are the sort of 4 points that I thought may be important for sharing with the students. As I said, come from my own experience, and They may or may not be the best, but I had to share them with them.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's the end of all the questions that I've got for you. So thank you so much for being on our podcast today. It's been really great talking to you and hearing about all of your experiences in psychology. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.